Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means a long time ago I was supposed to have done a how to bass. And today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. Well, it really doesn't like recording. But yeah, this thing. This is, as you'll see, not a terribly elegantly designed sound. And we'll discover why when we go through what's going on, but I do sort of like the result, so it's kind of neat. It begins its life as a harmor. And initially, the sound, when we get to the harmor, I'll show you that the harmor by itself was actually going to be the how to bass, but I couldn't leave well enough alone. The main thing that's happening is going on inside in post, essentially. Could have done all this in a patcher, but I wasn't actually prepared to consider going beyond just having a harmor. I wanted to keep things simple, but that didn't happen. There's a lot of modulation, and if you look in here, you can see that a lot of the modulation is actually the wet-dry mix. Like a lot of things are moving around there, and a lot of this stuff, especially because a lot of the things move sort of in concert, it probably could have been macroed. If I had made this in patcher, I probably would have made some of this macroing. But doing it individually like this actually opens up much more expressive ideas, because not every piece of modulation has to be identical, which means that it can be a much more sort of, I don't know, you can beat it sound a little bit more. It could be a little bit more vocal. So. Without all the effects on, and without the sub, which I have, I actually made a separate sub here. I high passed it at the bandpass stage, and then I have a separate sub going on. And this is because the original sub was just so dirty that it just wasn't viable. It's going into a limiter here without any of the effects. This is what this sounds like, which is pretty okay. Actually, the automation I have separated here. This is all the automation going on inside the harmor itself. This is all the automation going on post in the mixer inserts, and this is the automation of the sub, because I wanted to kind of move along with it. So here's the original sound, and a lot is happening to this here. Without the distortion or the compression on, this is what this sounds like. And one of the fun things that I'm doing here is that I'm automating the harmonic detune setting, which I'm hiding with my camera. There it is. Harmonic detune setting. Or no, I'm not. I was totally there the whole time. Derp. I don't know. I'm trying to watch the video to make sure I'm not obstructing things, because I do that sometimes. What this thing means, in sort of just straight up regular, at least the way that I'm using it, is that regular one-to-one mode here is straight up just saw wave down, and then 2 is square down. I'm using it to make the Reese by using a detune incrementally, which when it's distorting you can hear quite clearly. And if I go up to the 2 mode, it does that, but in square mode. And the reason why I also have the speed is because 0.04 to the 2 level is half as fast as 0.04 is to the 1 level. If I want the same speed, I have to go to 0.8. Now, the bummer about this is that this is actually literally detuning the sound. It's moving the harmonics up and down, except for the fundamental, which is why we're getting the Reese, because it's phase canceling against the solid fundamental tone. So to combat this, what I do is, as far up as I go down on the actual pitch. So it's moving the bass down, but everything else is sort of back at its original pitch. However, you can see here that you can't actually go below 1, but you can use a divider to kind of help you out with this. You can go to ratio 2 and then divider 2, multiply 2, divider 2, which is just to say now it's at 1 again. This is just 1 still, but now we can go down. So I can go down 3 to match the original pitch, so that we're actually still correctly tuned, as opposed to not having done that. And you can hear it's kind of it's not a correct tuning anymore. So what I had done here is that I went up to 1 to 2, and I copied the automation position, and then in the automation clip that I have for this, which is this guy here, I set the min and max value. The minimum to be the saw mode essentially, and the max to be square mode. So that means that when this automation is doing is that it's sliding the detune up and down to put the harmonics into saw harmonic position or square harmonic position, which means lots of things when the rest of the stuff are moving around. That's why you can kind of hear this pitchy motion here, because everything is actually moving around. You can see there it goes, pitch goes. These guys all change pitch, but this guy doesn't. Essentially, that's what happens. Yeah, on top of that, I have Portamento, and basically the default amount of time like listed. I'm using a lot of slide notes, especially here. That's a lot of fun there. Oh my god, that sounds just like, what the hell are those things called from Half-Life? And Half-Life 1 is specifically, they weren't in Half-Life 2. Oh damn, what were they called? But they had a whole bunch of eyes, and they like blew up at you. They're kind of neat. I'm sure someone else knows what I'm talking about. I screwed, like, endless amount of things I did here, because the amount of work that I did here is because I thought this was going to be the actual sound. I actually don't, if I had planned to do what I had done with it in post, I probably wouldn't have spent this much time on the sound as it is. However, and this is what I meant by it not being a very elegant sound, where there's a tremendous amount of wasted strokes to get to where I got to, but there is a benefit to that. And the benefit is that because there's so many things that add to what the sound is, even though like less things could have added up to be that, minor changes to all of those things can make the sound sort of move more in places that it couldn't have ever, if it were like completely elegant and only the steps were done to get to where we wanted to go. So like efficiency is nice and elegance is nice, but it isn't, and it can be good one way or another, but it can also be bad in sort of a limited. It can limit you in ways that you may not have expected. That's what I wanted to say there. 5 voices unison, as you can see here on the Harmonic Unison pitch window, which is located here. This is this configuration. And what this configuration means is that the middle frequencies here do not have unison on. Like this is just off unison and then a lot more unison and just different unison profiles. And the whole point of that is that certain harmonics are essentially blurred while other ones are not. So that like they when under distortion especially, they come together and do a lot of neat things. What else had changed spectrally? So in local EQ, I did this business, and that kind of big like kind of thing you hear when it's distorted is because of this giant peak over here on one of the lower harmonics. Like this harmonic in particularly, you can see when it's very bright. When against distortion, this thing basically gets an entire series of harmonics going up all of itself, and that's where we get that kind of like rounded, like weird sort of squarish result. Stop trying to explain sounds. That's what I should be doing. Now, there is actual modulation going on here. And what the modulation is as in the custom shapes for the filters. Go there. Or not, whatever. All right. So, custom shape 1 has 2 poles that I just put in here, but a halfway. So it's not completely filtering everything away, but there's just big old peaks. And custom shape 2 has 1 pole in the middle. And I'm automating the 2 frequency positions, and I'm also automating the width of custom shape 1. So those 2 poles are kind of like undulating in and out, and the third pole is kind of running around in the middle of it. That's what all this automation is up here. So these 2 guys are the filter frequencies, and this one's the width for those 2. As far as the positions that they're in and what I was going to do with that, I really didn't have a plan for it. I just moved them around until they just elicited the change that I wanted to. A couple of them have changes in the min and max settings. And the reason for that is that basically I would do what I did, and if I thought like, okay, I wanted to lower the profile of the whole thing, like I could either move the automation manually, or I could just bring down the max value, and that'll bring down the overall automation. So that's one thing I can be doing. So that's all the automation that's going on here, and I'm pretty sure that like I have a little bit of harmonic randomness, which is contributing to sort of the blurry value, and I have a lot of harmonizer. So the harmonizer, I randomized the matrix, and this is sort of what came out of it, and I had the harmonizer after pretty much all the filtering stuff. I do have it before the phaser, and the reason for that is because the phaser, while in harmonic mode, is tapped into the pitch changes going on in the unison. And that means that like the profile that it creates is going to be particularly interesting, but I didn't want that profile to be what the harmonizer picks up on. Instead, I wanted the profile the harmonizer picks up on to be the filter shape itself. Even though the filter shapes are actually kind of slight, they're not super present, but the harmonizer serves to augment that. So without the harmonizer, at the phaser. Now the phaser is moving kind of fast, and it's like interfering a bit with what like the Reese value is. And I'm pretty sure I got the calculation wrong about like how far down I'm supposed to go with this, but I'm sticking with it because it sounds all right the way that it is. I definitely did get it wrong because I'm supposed to go down 7, so this would have been down that value. And other kind of problem that there is when we're doing this is that like for some reason, if I were to copy this value and enter it into the maximum value in the automation clip and then put the automation clip at that value, it isn't the same value anymore. Like it doesn't actually stick to the same value. So it's it always changes when I do that, which is why I don't usually do that. But it's still the same range, and it's close enough to be what I wanted out of it. So like that's why it's still valuable. All of this gets distorted by the ribbon distortion. However, I have the mix almost all the way up. Like the mix up here changes essentially the mix between the distortion channel and the dry channel. Now, the two directions are phasing. So this way, if I hit this value here, it phase cancels the original signal against the distorted signal, which actually gets us only distortion, which is a very interesting thing to do. That's not what we're doing here, but I wanted to point out that you can do that. It's kind of a neat trick. But this actually means that we're leaning closer towards the clean signal than we are the distorted signal. So we still have some of the grit in there, but it's not totally, you know, overbearing. And then a huge amount of compression. And that's more or less that sound. And then all the other stuff that we did to it. Now, the first thing that I did in the big list of stuff here was I made this bandpass automation here. Now, what this bandpass automation is we have two parameters. We have the primary position, which is just, you know, where it is, and then we have bandwidth. It's actually, for the most part, it's a pretty small band, but then you kind of see that most of the time when it goes up, it widens up a bit, so that we're not getting that like really high pitched kind of like frequency position up on top, but we have it widens up a bit so that we have more of the sound, and then it goes up and down depending on, you know, what I want to do. It isn't always moving along with the same value, which is what I mean by like if I could macro the two parameters together, but I want to have a bit more expression than that. After I did that, I compressed the crap out of it. In the bandpass thing is also where I put the high pass, although at the time when I was designing the signal chain, I didn't have that there. But I'm just gonna leave that there because that's what's happening. The compression, I have like I'm not crushing up the low end too much, which I guess because I'm getting rid of most of it is not necessarily necessary. But the mid and the highs are being pushed up pretty hard and also pretty fast. However, I'm not going so fast as to create a lot of distortion, except for on the master. The how fast the compression is actuating on the master absolutely is like enough to cause distortion. You can kind of see like right there. You can see if I zoom in far enough, you can see individual essentially oscillations. Like this measurement of level is just the oscillation of the waveform, and the compression is actually actuating faster than the oscillation of the waveform, which means that it's essentially shaping the waveform. That's how wave shaping works. Go figure. So it is screwing with it, but it sounds better that way. Like I picked a particular value just by listening to it to determine at what point did it sound pleasurable. It doesn't go all the way because it's not completely distorting it. This isn't identically what the wave shaper would do if I just set the wave shaper to be in this position, but it's doing enough to it that it's changing it, and it sounds pretty great that way. Oh yeah. So along with what's going on, actually I should point this out here on this EQ. I'm doing the automation, but I'm also automating the mix level of the EQ itself, but like extremely slightly. And like if I were smart about it, what I would have done is I would have moved the minimum value kind of far up so that like I could automate like larger sweeping automation instead of doing this tiny smallness. But essentially what's happening is that it's bringing down just enough that especially when it's under compression, we can hear the high end creep in kind of over it. So if I didn't have that, that's what that sounds like. And then with it, now again, this is something that I could have macroed together so that it all sort of played together nicely. But then also again, that I could sort of smoothly, like I could like run up the sounds at certain parts of the modulation. You really get this like incredibly personal touch to it, so it's not just like robotically up and down all the time. And in fact, I almost universally prefer doing this to macroing stuff because like for this reason. And although like especially current like in like modern sort of bass music stuff, a lot of the sounds are like, all macros, which is mostly I'm pretty sure born of just because we use things like Serum and Massive, which like you know promote the idea of macroing. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not something that I prefer to do personally. So that's happening there. Now I put on this Valhalla Room next, which same deal. It's pretty much pretty big reverb, but I'm automating it with this guy here, which is pretty sweet. And then I have another reverb that I'm automating in a sort of a wider arc. This guy here. So we are having some reverb, like actual reverb, as opposed to like the cutting in reverb that serves to give it character. Now the Vocoder is fun. What's happening here is that this is doing stuff, but I'm also automating it on and off depending on sort of position of modulation, and mostly when it's cutting coming up. So like this is like cutting in and out, but like, the vocoder itself is also like there's plenty of the modulator coming like it's its own modulator carrier. So we have plenty of the original signal coming through inside the vocoder itself through the mixer, but there's still enough going on here. And like what's going on here is sort of typical vocoder stuff that I do. I crank the voice count all the way up, order all the way up. And the band distribution, I moved it, I kind of pushed it up a little bit so that the bands favor the high end in terms of like density, which makes it match actual sort of harmonic activity a little bit better than if it were just straight up like octave based. I messed with the bandwidth a whole bunch. I messed with like this, you can do this per band. If you're not familiar with Vocoder, one of the reasons why Vocoder is like the best vocoder there is because every parameter that exists in it, you can change more or less on a per band basis. And so I did so on the bandwidth page. So you can see here like some bands are thinner and wider than others. Same thing with the modulator pitch shift, which just moves the bands up and down in spectrum. Band distribution literally moves all the bands up in spectrum, but the modulator pitch shift moves essentially the modulator's influence up and down the spectrum. So it changes sort of like where the band activity is. Certain bands will be active where they wouldn't have been based on this graph here, which again, you can move around on a per band basis, which is a little bit more nebulous, and I just kind of set the ear. In fact, most of these things I set the ear. There's very few things that I have any kind of like a sort of a utilitarian approach to where I have a particular value that I'm looking for. For the most part, I just do it because it sounds cool. Automating that on and off. And then to top it all off, there's a big EQ at the top, which is just some, adjustments. So then I copied the Harmer. I don't know why this, oh yeah, that's right. I just put that there for demonstration. Derp. I have this Harmer here, and I basically cloned it and then made a sub. And now the sub is extremely simple. This is just, I put on square mode over here, and I put on local EQ, so we only got a couple of harmonics, and I really only have one harmonic and extra harmonic here. But then there's like a really thin one up there, but you can't hear that. That's like super tiny. In fact, if I were to just do that. Oops, I appear to have missed. There we go. Don't need that third guy there. So that's a sub. And the effects side, I have just a free balance. It's just a volume that I'm automating, so that it's not just a solid sub the whole time. It's a solid sub for a lot of the times, but it still moves around. And the two of those things come together into a limiter, which is very loose, has extremely long release time and long ahead, and the attack is a little bit present, so it means like it's really not gonna damage the signal a lot, but like it'll still pull up some stuff, so that reverb kind of breathes in, and like the bass actually crushes against the original signal somewhat, so that there's a bunch of interplay in there, just because of like the really loose but like really high gain compression going on. And that's the sound. So like the main animation to all of this is essentially the bandpass. Like this is what's causing there to be rhythm and motion, and everything else kind of moves around with it. But because it's all separate, we can move it in sort of individual ways. This is a hell of a lot of work. Like especially if I'm gonna have something like this in a song, making things come together like this would just like to be like perfect. Certainly is extremely meticulous doing, and macroing stuff certainly serves to save a lot of time. And there's totally ways that you can macro stuff, but then also have secondary modulation on the macroing so that it like is not entirely like synced. For example, like you can do that like with individual parameters. And maybe one day I'll do a how-to base that does that, just because I think it's probably more elegant. Anyway, this FLP will be available to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.